I've got a piece of paper and no slides, which probably accounts for why I'm a career detective and not in the creative industries. What I want to talk, and Eric used a phrase which I'll pick up on, which is the adversity of now. And I really want to talk about an organisation that has done the same thing for a very long time, but whether we're successful or unsuccessful is how quickly we can adapt to the way things are changing. And this city, what makes this city so fantastic and so much of an opportunity for all the things that you're talking about, is the way that it changes so quickly and how it moves so fast. But in business terms, we all talk about mission statements and visions and all of that strategy stuff. The Met Police was created in 1829, and there are principles that Robert Peel set, and a couple of those, which I'll start with. The basic mission for the police exists. The reason the police exist is to prevent crime and disorder. And we seek and preserve public favour, not by catering to public opinion, but constantly demonstrating absolutely impartial service to the law. Now, they've stood the test of time pretty well, but what it is how we adapt those to what is happening now and create the city that allows you to do all the stuff that you are doing and make this place prosperous and a good place to be. And it is a very safe city, but we need to constantly adapt. And what I want to talk about are some of the challenges. We just mentioned there the last summer, and for me the kind of heading here is a tale of two summers, really. And I've, in the same organisation, had the summer of 2011, where we had all the fallout from the various scandals in and around phone hacking and all the questions about integrity. And just when we thought that had been a pretty traumatic summer, we had the fatal shooting of Mark Duggan and the days of rioting that ensued. And I haven't really got time to go into my take on those 3 or 4 days that followed. But we then have the summer that we've just gone through, where you roll through the Diamond Jubilee, the Olympic Games, the Paralympics, and the same organisation is being lauded for what it's able to do and being praised here, there and everywhere. And I guess my reflection on both of those summers is how thin the veneer is, how thin the veneer is 2011, how thin the veneer of order is in our society, but equally how quickly we recover. I mean, the rioting stopped on the Monday. By Tuesday evening, London was more or less back to doing what it normally does, and by Thursday it was absolutely back to doing what it normally does. But equally this summer, how thin the veneer of that we're all chatting and friendly on the tube disappeared when they closed the Paralympics, and we're now back to where we were. So there's a lot of things that we're sort of sitting on that are fairly shallow. Just some metrics about policing London. We've got around 50,000 staff in the Met Police, about 31,000 police officers, and the remainder what we call police staff, who are members of staff who do all sorts of both operational and support functions. And we receive just over 5 million calls for assistance every year, of which about 40% would be what we would call an immediate call, so a kind of 999 call. We create custody records every time someone gets arrested, and that amounts to a little bit over 300,000 in any year. And an interesting statistic this year is that over 40% of those custody records were for foreign nationals, people who weren't actually are not UK citizens. We take about 1 million reports of crime every year. And in terms of the operational activity, to give you a flavour, we respond to about 3,000 armed incidents where someone has rung in and believes there's a firearm present, and we run about 600 pre-planned armed operations, the like of which was the one in which Mark Duggan was shot, where we are out there armed ourselves dealing with armed criminality in London. So it's a fairly large-scale endeavour. And we try and deliver it at a sort of London level, which is my bit of the business, but then also very much in the 32 boroughs. But it's the changing nature of London that I think is the most dramatic challenge to what we do. We're now in a situation, 32% of the people living in London now were born outside this country, and actually 54% last year of births in London hospitals were to mothers who were born outside the UK. So not their heritage is outside, but they're born outside the UK. But what we have is very uneven growth rates as well, and I know, seeing some of the presentations earlier talking about transport infrastructure growth, the growth in London is phenomenal in some areas, but it's very uneven, and that creates all sorts of challenges for us. Technology, the last two speakers, the rate of changing technology, both in terms of what that presents for us in crime challenges, what it presents for us in opportunities and how we can tackle criminality, are enormous, and we've got to try and keep up with that. patterns of business and work, changing travel arrangements, all impact on how we have to try and deliver a uniform service across the 32 boroughs of London. And the threats changing. I've watched the terrorism threat, which is very relevant in where we are now, move from the kind of Irish threat that we were dealing with for years. Post 9/11 and the Terrorism Act of 2000, it became much more international. And that international threat now is morphing into much more being about what we call the prevent agenda, dealing with individuals who are being radicalised, who are here and being radicalised, less than the threat of an organised event such as sort of 9/11 or the 7/7 bombings. So dealing with those kind of changes around terrorism presents us with all sorts of challenge. And in organised crime, my kind of arena, we used to deal with what we colloquially, if not necessarily affectionately, referred to as drugs and thugs. And that we were quite comfortable with, and we know how to do that. And we're now moving into increasingly what we would call cyber-enabled serious and organised criminality, both new crimes that are there because of the amount of our world that's happening in a virtual space, or technology allowing people to do existing types of crime in a completely different way. And that again presents us with real challenges, but also with some real opportunities in terms of how we can intervene. And it links very much into the theme around prevention and partnership that I will kind of close with in where we need to go. But the challenge for us is really how we stay mobile enough to deal with these changing threats. And cyber is the best example for me. In what I would call traditional organised crime, it changes fairly slowly over the years. Whereas the methods, the targets, the way that these people are operating in cyber is changing almost on a monthly basis. And you're getting people there who are key players who are not the kind of people that we're used to dealing with at all. We get to the centre of some really big cyber criminality, and it's a 17-year-old boy sitting in his bedroom in a flat in Peckham. That is not someone that's ever going to be anywhere on our radar. So it's creating all sorts of challenges, and it's all very international, as you would understand. So challenges around jurisdictions, challenges about working with other agencies and other organisations. So we've got to really try and be as light on our feet as we can, and for all government organisations, that's not exactly what we're special at, and it creates all sorts of challenges in funding cycles and cycles of policy. We also in London pick up a whole host of other major issues to look at the moment, the ones that would be obvious to you. We're coordinating and dealing with all of the fallout from Jimmy Savile and all the child sexual exploitation issues that come out of that. We've got some of my people were over this weekend in Egypt, where we're looking to work with the Egyptian authorities to try and get hold of some of the illegally gained assets from the previous regime that are in London. We've got people working in Portugal trying to help find Madeleine McCann or find out what happened with Madeleine McCann. And you've got an ever-changing protest profile. We've got student demonstrations tomorrow and all the latch-ons you get from that. We've got the present situation in Gaza creating all sorts of issues for us around embassies in central London, and this just goes on as part of what London is all about. Big changes, policing and crime commissioners, you'll be aware of that sort of non-event that happened last week. For us, it's the mayor, and I think it's a much more sensible arrangement. But we've got massive budget cuts. We've got to take £500 million out of our budget in the next 3 years. That's a budget that's about £3.5 billion for the Met, but not all of that is stuff that we can take the money out of. So we've got some serious issues around that, and managing that local and national responsibilities that we do, because quite rightly the people in London that fund us want us to be dealing with London problems, but we also have a number of national responsibilities. So where does that mean we need to be? It means, to me, the two biggest things, and I suspect is what any of you would want around how we deliver our services and reconfigure them for these budget cuts, is around accessibility and responsiveness. People need to be able to get to us in the way they want to and is most convenient, and then they need to see that we are responding to whatever their problem or their issue is. Some of those will be very modern, some of those will be incredibly old-fashioned. We've got to get into meaningful partnership. Policing is not just the police. We all have a responsibility to police our society, ourselves, our families, to allow us to do our business and to go around and live our lives. And we've got to get into meaningful partnerships with business, industry, communities. And if I had more time, I could give you some great examples of how we've done that to collectively make ourselves safe and protect ourselves. We're going to be smaller. We have to focus on our core role, on those things that only we can do to help protect society, because that's what we need to deliver. And going back to what Peel said, the absolute, where we have our strength is we have to do that impartially. We have to be seen to be doing what is right in the way that is right and helping those that need helping, not those that are more powerful, more influential or anything else along those lines. And that is a really important point with the diversity in London that I talked about. We've got to be seen to delivering that service. But if we can deliver that, then that creates the environment that all of you are able to do all the things that you do and that you are talking about today. Thank you.